Luke lived in a small, quiet neighborhood where most people knew each other by name. The streets were lined with neat houses, each with a little garden in front, and the air smelled fresh with flowers and green leaves. Luke loved his home. It was not very big or fancy, but it was his safe place, where he shared many happy moments with his wife, Anna, and their young daughter, Mia. Every morning, Luke would wake up early and water the plants in the garden. The garden was his favorite part of the house. It was full of colorful flowers, reds, yellows, and purples that made the place look alive and bright. Mia loved to run around there, chasing butterflies and picking petals to make small bouquets for her mother. It was a peaceful life, and Luke was grateful for it. But, as in many quiet places, not everything was always calm. Behind the friendly faces and smiling neighbors, there were rules to follow. The neighborhood was controlled by the Homeowners Association, known as the HOA. The HOA made rules about what people could do with their homes and gardens, and everyone had to follow these rules to keep the neighborhood looking tidy and nice. At first, Luke didn't mind the HOA rules much. He followed them carefully, keeping his lawn mowed and his garden neat. But there was one woman who seemed to care more about the rules than anyone else: Margie. Margie was the chairperson of the HOA. She was a woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a serious face. She always dressed neatly and spoke with a firm voice. Luke had noticed Margie during one of the HOA meetings. These meetings were usually boring, with neighbors discussing small problems and making decisions about common areas. But Margie was different. She seemed to enjoy pointing out mistakes and telling people what they had done wrong. At first, Luke thought she was just very strict. But soon, he felt something more uncomfortable. Margie seemed to be watching him very closely. It all started with the mailbox. Luke had painted his mailbox bright blue, a color that reminded him of the clear sky on a summer day. He thought it added a bit of cheer to the street. But Margie did not agree. She said the color was not allowed and did not fit the neighborhood style. She sent Luke a letter asking him to repaint it in a more neutral color. Luke was surprised. The blue mailbox did not bother him or his family, and it was a small thing. But he did not want any trouble, so he repainted it white, just like everyone else's. He hoped that would be the end of it. However, Margie did not stop there. Soon after, Luke started planting new flowers in his garden. He wanted to make the place even more beautiful for his family. The flowers grew wild and bright, mixing colors and shapes in a way that made the garden look like a little rainbow. But Margie saw this as a problem too. She said Luke's garden was too messy and not following the rules. She sent him another letter, asking him to cut back the flowers and keep everything neat and simple. Luke was confused. He had read the HOA rules many times, but they were not very clear about how a garden should look. He talked to some neighbors, but most of them were afraid to speak up. Margie was powerful, and people did not want to get on her bad side. Still, Luke tried to fix the garden. He trimmed some flowers and pulled out the wild plants. But every time he made a change, Margie found something new to complain about. It was like she was never satisfied. The tension grew with every letter and every meeting. Anna noticed the change in Luke. He was becoming tired and worried. The joy of gardening was slowly disappearing, replaced by stress. Mia asked why Daddy looked sad sometimes, and Anna did not have a good answer. One evening, after a long day at work, Luke sat on the porch and looked at the garden. The flowers were still there, but they did not feel the same. The bright colors seemed dull now, as if the life had been taken out of them. Luke sighed deeply. He wondered why Margie cared so much about small things like mailboxes and gardens. Margie was watching from across the street, standing near her house. She saw Luke's tired face and smiled to herself. She believed she was protecting the neighborhood, keeping it perfect. But Luke began to realize that her idea of perfect was something cold and empty, something that could hurt people and destroy happiness. The peaceful neighborhood was no longer the same. A quiet battle had started, and Luke did not know how it would end. But he was determined to keep his home and his family safe, no matter what. The days after the mailbox and garden troubles grew heavier for Luke. What started as small disagreements turned into a constant worry. Every morning, he checked the mailbox carefully, making sure nothing else would upset Margie. He looked at his garden with mixed feelings. The bright colors he loved were now a source of stress. He didn't understand why one person's opinion could affect his happiness so much. Margie's sharp eyes seemed to be everywhere. She walked around the neighborhood every day, clipboard in hand, writing notes about things she didn't like. Some neighbors whispered that she enjoyed having control, like she was the queen of the street. But no one openly challenged her. They said it was easier to agree and avoid problems. One afternoon, Luke received an official letter from the HOA. It was different from the polite notes he had gotten before. This letter was serious and full of warnings. It said Luke's garden was not in compliance with the HOA rules and needed to be fixed immediately. If he didn't follow the rules, he could face fines or even legal action. Luke felt a knot in his stomach. He knew Margie was behind this. Her strict control was no longer just about rules, now it was a personal battle. He wanted to fight back, but he didn't know how. The HOA had the power, and Margie was the one who controlled it. He talked to Anna about the letter. She listened carefully and held his hand. "Maybe we should talk to Margie," she suggested softly. "Try to explain how you feel." Luke wasn't sure. Margie had never been kind in their past meetings. But Anna's words made him hope. Maybe if he tried to talk, things could get better. The next day, Luke went to Margie's house. He found her trimming her perfectly shaped bushes. She looked up and smiled politely, but her eyes were cold. "Margie," Luke began, "I want to understand the rules better. I've tried to follow them, but I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. Can we talk?" Margie nodded slowly. "The rules are clear," she said. "Everyone must keep their property neat and tidy. Your garden is too wild. It doesn't fit the neighborhood's look." Luke tried to explain how much the garden meant to him and his family. He talked about the flowers and how Mia loved playing there. But Margie interrupted. "This neighborhood has standards," she said firmly. "If you don't follow the rules, it affects all of us. I'm only doing what's best for everyone." Luke wanted to say more, but Margie's tone left no room for discussion. He left feeling small and powerless. The letter wasn't just a warning, it was a threat. Back home, Anna and Mia tried to cheer him up. Mia drew pictures of flowers and glued them on the fridge. Anna cooked his favorite dinner. But Luke's mind was heavy with worry. He wondered if Margie would ever stop. Days passed, and the tension in the neighborhood grew. Luke saw Margie talking to other neighbors, pointing at his house. Some people nodded in agreement, while others looked uncomfortable. Luke felt the cold weight of being watched and judged. One evening, a knock came at the door. It was Mr. Harris, an older man who lived 2 houses down. He looked serious but kind. "Luke," Mr. Harris said quietly, "I know what you're going through. Margie has been like this before. She likes to control everything, and if you don't fit her idea, she makes life hard." Luke felt relief. It was the first time someone spoke openly about Margie's behavior. "But what can I do?" Luke asked. "She controls the HOA. She has the power." Mr. Harris sighed. "You have to be careful. But don't give up. Find others who feel the same. Strength is in numbers." Luke thought about this. Maybe he wasn't alone after all. That night, Luke sent messages to a few neighbors, quietly asking if anyone else had problems with the HOA or Margie. To his surprise, some replied. They shared stories of small fights and unfair rules, but no one had stood up yet. Luke felt a spark of hope. If people joined together, maybe they could change things. But Margie was not someone who gave up easily. A week later, Luke received another letter. This time, it was a formal notice of a hearing at the HOA office. The letter said Luke had violated the community rules and would need to explain himself. The hearing felt like a trap. Luke knew Margie would be there, ready to accuse him. He felt nervous but also determined. He wouldn't let his family's home be taken away without a fight. Anna stood by his side. "We'll face this together," she said, holding his hand tightly. The day of the hearing arrived. Luke sat in a small room filled with neighbors and HOA officials. Margie was there, looking as calm and strict as ever. When it was Luke's turn to speak, he took a deep breath and told the truth about his love for the garden, the letters he received, and the unfair pressure he felt. Some neighbors listened quietly. Others looked away. Margie spoke next, repeating her strict rules and saying Luke had broken them on purpose. Luke left the hearing feeling exhausted but more certain than ever. This fight was bigger than just a garden or a mailbox. It was about standing up for what was right. That night, as Luke sat in his quiet home, he looked at Mia sleeping peacefully in her bed. He promised himself he would protect this home and family, no matter what Margie did next. The calm in the neighborhood was breaking, and soon, Luke would learn that some storms were stronger than anyone expected. The night air was still and quiet, like many others in the neighborhood. Luke's house stood peacefully under the soft glow of the moonlight. Inside, Luke, Anna, and little Mia were fast asleep, dreaming of simple joys and future plans. But that night, something dark was about to break the calm. It started with a faint smell, a strange scent of smoke drifting through the house. Anna woke up first, coughing and worried. She shook Luke gently. "Luke, something's wrong," she whispered, her voice trembling. Luke opened his eyes and immediately felt the heat. Flames were flickering near the kitchen window. Panic rose in his chest as he grabbed Mia, who was still half asleep, and rushed toward the front door. The fire spread quickly, hungry and wild, eating away at the walls and furniture they had cherished for years. Outside, neighbors were waking up to the sound of sirens and shouting. Lights from fire trucks flashed through the dark streets. Luke stood on the sidewalk, holding Anna and Mia close, watching helplessly as firefighters fought to control the blaze. The fire was fierce. It took hours before it was finally put out, but the damage was terrible. The house Luke and his family had built their life in was now just a blackened shell. Smoke still hung in the air, and the smell of burnt wood made Luke's stomach twist. The neighbors gathered quietly across the street, some shocked, others sad. Luke's heart felt heavy, but his mind raced. How did this happen? Was it an accident? Or was it something more? In the following days, Luke learned that the fire's cause was suspicious. The firefighters found signs that suggested the fire had started in more than one place inside the house. The police began asking questions, and rumors started to spread through the neighborhood. Luke thought about Margie. Their recent fights had been harsh and public. She had made his life difficult for months. Could she have done this? The idea felt like a sharp pain, but he couldn't ignore it. One afternoon, the police called Luke to the station. They showed him photos and evidence collected at the fire scene. Some items found near the house contained materials that could be used to start a fire. The officers said they were investigating possible arson. Luke's heart sank. If someone had burned his home on purpose, it was more than just damage, it was a personal attack. He thought about Anna and Mia and felt a fierce protectiveness. Back in the neighborhood, people were divided. Some whispered that Margie had gone too far, letting her anger control her. Others refused to believe she could do such a thing. Margie herself stayed silent, never denying or confirming the rumors. She acted as if nothing had happened, walking the streets with her usual cold smile. Luke's friends urged him to stay strong. "We believe in you," they said. "Don't let her scare you." But it was hard. Every time Luke closed his eyes, he saw the flames and smelled the smoke. He remembered the pictures Mia had drawn of their garden and house, now lost in the fire. He thought about the unfair letters and the hearing, and it all felt like a nightmare. One evening, as Luke sat on the empty lot where his house once stood, Anna came to him with a small box. Inside were the few things they had saved: photos, a favorite toy, and a little flower pot Mia had planted. "We will rebuild," Anna said softly. "Not just the house, but our lives." Luke nodded, but he knew it would not be easy. The fight with Margie was far from over. A week later, the news spread that Margie had filed a claim in court to defend herself against accusations of arson. The neighborhood buzzed with gossip. No one expected to see her at the courtroom, but when the day came, Margie walked in with her usual calm and confidence. Luke was there too, his heart pounding. Seeing Margie in the same room felt strange. She looked like a stranger, cold and distant, without any sign of regret. The judge listened carefully as both sides presented their stories. Luke spoke about his love for his home, the trouble with the HOA, and the night the fire destroyed everything. Margie's lawyer said there was no proof she had done anything wrong. Margie herself remained quiet, watching everything with sharp eyes. The courtroom was tense. Luke felt a mix of anger, sadness, and hope. He wanted justice not just for his lost house, but for his family and the peace they deserved. Outside, neighbors gathered, waiting to hear the outcome. Some hoped Margie would be held responsible. Others still doubted. Luke looked at Anna and Mia, holding their hands tightly. He knew this was just the beginning of a long battle. But no matter what, he promised himself he would protect his family and their future. The quiet neighborhood was now a place of pain and courage. Luke's home may have burned, but his spirit was not broken. And in the weeks ahead, the truth would start to come to light. The day of the courtroom hearing arrived, and Luke felt a storm of emotions swirling inside him. He had spent restless nights thinking about what he would say, how he would explain everything to the judge and the people sitting in the room. The pain of losing his home was still fresh, but now, the fight was bigger. He was fighting for justice and for his family's future. Anna held his hand tightly as they walked into the courthouse. Little Mia clung to her mother's side, sensing the seriousness of the day even if she did not fully understand it. The room was filled with neighbors, reporters, and people from the HOA. Everyone seemed to be waiting for the truth to come out. Margie arrived shortly after, walking with her usual confident and calm expression. She wore a neat dress and carried a small purse, looking every bit the strict chairperson the neighborhood knew. Her eyes met Luke's for a brief moment, cold and unreadable, and then she turned away. The judge, an older man with kind eyes but a firm voice, called the room to order. "We are here today to hear the case involving the fire that destroyed Mr. Luke's home," he began. "Both sides will have the chance to present their evidence and tell their stories." Luke's lawyer stood up first. He was a calm man who had listened carefully to Luke's story and understood the pain behind it. "Your Honor," he said, "this case is about more than a fire. It is about a man and his family who lost everything because of actions that may have been intentional. We have evidence that the fire was started by someone familiar with the property, someone who had motive." The lawyer showed photos of the burned house, security footage from neighbors' cameras, and the materials found near the fire that could start flames quickly. He explained how the fire had started in more than one place, which was unusual for an accident. Margie's lawyer stood up next. He spoke in a firm voice, "There is no direct proof that my client had anything to do with this fire. The accusations are based on suspicion and neighborhood gossip. Margie has been a dedicated member of the HOA for years, working to keep the community safe and orderly. We ask the court to dismiss these charges." Margie herself did not speak during the trial, but she watched carefully, her face showing no sign of guilt or fear. Luke found it difficult to look at her without remembering all the harsh letters and meetings, the cold rules she had forced on him. Then, the judge asked Luke to tell his story in his own words. Luke stood slowly, his voice shaking at first but growing stronger with every word. "I loved my home," Luke said quietly. "It was not perfect, but it was ours. I worked hard to make the garden beautiful for my family. When Margie and the HOA began to send letters and complaints, it felt like they were trying to take that away from me. I didn't understand why someone would want to hurt us." He paused, looking at the faces in the courtroom. "The night of the fire, I lost everything. Not just the house, but the memories, the safety. I don't know why someone would do this, but I believe it was because of the fight we had with Margie and the HOA. I want justice, not just for me, but for my family and our neighborhood." The room was silent. The weight of Luke's words filled the air. Neighbors who had been quiet before began to exchange looks, some nodding slowly, others frowning in thought. Then, something unexpected happened. A woman stood up in the back of the room. She was Mrs. Benson, a neighbor who had lived 2 streets away. "Your Honor," she said, her voice clear, "I want to tell the court what I saw the night of the fire." Everyone turned to look at her. Mrs. Benson continued, "I saw Margie near Luke's house just before the fire started. I was afraid to speak up before because I didn't want trouble. But I can't stay silent anymore." Margie's face changed for a moment. Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. The judge nodded and made a note. Mrs. Benson's testimony was important. It added a new layer to the case. After the testimony ended, the judge thanked everyone and said he would take time to consider the evidence carefully before making a decision. Luke walked out of the courtroom feeling both relieved and anxious. He had spoken his truth, but the battle was not over yet. Outside, some neighbors approached him quietly. "Thank you for standing up," one woman said softly. "We've all been afraid, but maybe it's time to speak out." Anna squeezed Luke's hand. "No matter what happens, we have each other," she said. Mia smiled and held her father's hand tightly, a small light in the darkness. As they left the courthouse, Luke looked back at the building. The fight for justice was not just about his home anymore. It was about truth, courage, and the hope that even the smallest voices could be heard. The storm had come, but Luke was ready to face it. With his family beside him, he knew he would keep fighting for their home, for their peace, and for a future free from fear. The days after the courtroom hearing were some of the hardest Luke had ever faced. The judge had not yet made a decision, and the waiting was painful. Luke felt as if his whole life was hanging in the balance. The neighborhood that once felt like home now seemed full of shadows and secrets. Anna tried her best to keep their spirits up. She reminded Luke that no matter what happened, they still had each other. Mia was too young to understand the fight, but her innocent laughter and curious questions were a reminder of what Luke was fighting for. One afternoon, Luke received a phone call from Mr. Harris, the older neighbor who had quietly supported him before. "Luke," Mr. Harris said, his voice low but serious, "there's something you need to see. Come by my house when you can." Curious and hopeful, Luke went to Mr. Harris's house later that day. The old man led him into his study and pulled out a small box. Inside were documents, photos, and notes, evidence that no one else knew about. "This," Mr. Harris said, "is proof that Margie has been involved in some very strange activities for years. Not just with the HOA, but things that could explain why she wanted to control everything so tightly." Luke looked through the papers carefully. There were photos of Margie meeting with strangers late at night, bills showing large payments to unknown companies, and letters threatening neighbors who didn't agree with her. "It looks like she was using the HOA to hide something bigger," Mr. Harris explained. "Maybe money, maybe power. But I think she was willing to do anything to keep control, including hurting you." Luke felt a chill run through him. The fight was not just about a garden or a mailbox. It was about uncovering a dangerous secret hidden behind Margie's strict rules. With this new evidence, Luke felt a new hope. He knew he had to share it with his lawyer and the court, but he also felt scared. Margie was powerful, and if she was hiding something this big, she might try to stop him. Anna noticed the change in Luke. "Be careful," she warned gently. "But don't lose your courage." That night, Luke sat at the kitchen table with the papers spread out in front of him. Mia was asleep in her room, and Anna was reading quietly nearby. Luke thought about everything: the fire, the fight, and the neighbors who had been too afraid to speak up. He made a decision. He would take the evidence to the court. He would tell the truth, no matter how hard it was. The next hearing was filled with tension. Margie's lawyer tried to dismiss the new evidence as unimportant and unrelated. But Luke's lawyer argued that it showed a pattern of behavior and motive that could not be ignored. The judge listened carefully as Mr. Harris testified about what he had found. Other neighbors began to speak up too, sharing small stories of things they had noticed but never said out loud. The courtroom felt different now. The quiet power Margie once held was weakening. The truth was coming out, piece by piece. Margie's calm face began to show cracks. She answered questions with less confidence and avoided eye contact with the neighbors who spoke against her. Luke watched as the mask Margie wore began to fall away. He saw the fear behind her eyes, the fear of losing control and being exposed. The judge asked everyone to take a break while he considered the new information. Luke felt a mixture of hope and anxiety. The fight was far from over, but the truth was shining through the darkness. After the break, the judge spoke. "Based on the new evidence and testimonies, I am ordering a full investigation into Margie's activities and the circumstances of the fire." The courtroom gasped. Margie's face went pale, and she left the room without a word. Outside, Luke felt a rush of relief. The first step toward justice had been taken. He looked at Anna and Mia, holding their hands tightly. "We're going to be okay," he whispered. The neighborhood began to change. More people felt brave enough to speak out, and the power Margie once held started to fade. Luke knew the road ahead would be difficult. There would be challenges, and Margie would not give up easily. But with the truth on his side and the support of his family and neighbors, he felt stronger than ever. That night, as Luke looked out at the empty lot where his house once stood, he imagined a new beginning. The fire had taken much from him, but it had also brought something unexpected: the chance to stand up for what was right and to rebuild not just a house, but a community. The investigation into Margie's actions brought a new wave of attention to the neighborhood. Police officers and inspectors arrived to look at documents, interview neighbors, and gather more evidence. The quiet community that had once lived under Margie's strict control was now buzzing with whispered conversations and cautious hope. Luke and his family tried to find some peace amid the chaos. They stayed temporarily with Anna's sister, whose warm home was a refuge from the storm. Mia ran through the garden chasing butterflies, laughing for the first time in weeks, and Luke felt a small spark of joy in his heart. Even with the investigation underway, the road ahead felt long and uncertain. Luke missed his home deeply, the place where he had laughed, cried, and dreamed. But he knew that rebuilding would take more than bricks and wood. It would take courage, trust, and a community ready to heal. One evening, Luke sat with Anna on the porch of the temporary home. The sky was painted with soft pinks and oranges as the sun set. They talked quietly about their plans. "We can build something better," Anna said softly. "Not just a new house, but a better neighborhood. One where people respect each other and work together." Luke nodded. Margie tried to control everything, but maybe this is a chance to bring everyone closer. The next day, Luke started to visit neighbors one by one. He listened to their stories, fears, frustrations, hopes. Many were afraid to speak up before, but now, with Margie's power weakening, they found strength in each other. Mr. Harris, The older neighbor who had helped Luke before, joined in. "We need to come together," he said firmly. "If we stand united, no one can tear us apart." Slowly, the neighborhood began to change. People who had kept to themselves started talking. New ideas for community gardens, block parties, and neighborhood watch groups were shared. The fear that once hung over the streets started to lift. Meanwhile, the investigation continued. Evidence mounted against Margie, showing she had misused HOA funds and intimidated neighbors. The police took her statements seriously, and soon she was facing serious charges. Luke's heart was heavy with the knowledge that Margie's actions had hurt so many. But he also felt hope that justice would be served. One afternoon, Luke received a call from the city's housing department. "We want to help rebuild your home," the woman said kindly. "There are programs and grants available to support families who have lost their houses in fires. We'll do everything we can." Luke felt tears of relief. The road ahead was still hard, but the first step toward rebuilding was there. Back at the temporary home, Luke gathered with Anna and Mia. They looked at photos of their old house and talked about how the new one would be different. Luke promised Mia a special garden where she could play and grow flowers. As the weeks passed, plans were made. Architects visited, blueprints were drawn, and permits were filed. The empty lot where the house had stood was cleared, ready for a fresh start. The neighborhood continued to heal too. Neighbors worked together to clean streets, plant flowers, and create a safe space for children. Block parties brought laughter and music to the streets. Slowly, the fear that Margie had spread was replaced by friendship and trust. One evening, as Luke walked through the neighborhood, he saw Mrs. Benson and Mr. Harris chatting with new neighbors. Children played freely, and people smiled and greeted each other warmly. The neighborhood felt alive again. Luke realized that the fire, as terrible as it was, had awakened something important: a chance for people to come together and build a better future. At the same time, Margie's court case moved forward. She faced the consequences of her actions, and the neighborhood watched as justice took its course. For some, it was a difficult time, but for Luke, it was a sign that truth and fairness could win. As the first walls of Luke's new home began to rise, he stood with Anna and Mia, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. The journey had been painful, but they were not alone. Their community had grown stronger, and their family's hope had been rebuilt. That night, Luke sat on the porch of the temporary home, looking at the stars. He whispered a promise to himself and to his family: no matter what came next, they would face it together, with courage and love. The fire had taken their home, but it had not taken their spirit. And with every brick laid in the new house, Luke felt that hope was rising too, stronger and brighter than ever. The months passed slowly but surely. Luke's new house was almost ready. The walls stood tall and strong, painted in warm colors that reminded him of hope and fresh starts. Anna and Mia helped pick out the curtains and decorations, making the empty rooms feel like home before they even moved in. The neighborhood had changed too. Where once there was fear and silence, now there was friendship and laughter. The people who had stayed quiet were now part of a community that looked out for each other. The gardens were blooming, children played together, and neighbors shared stories over cups of tea on their porches. Luke stood on the porch of his new home one late afternoon, feeling the gentle breeze on his face. Mia ran around the yard, chasing a butterfly, her laughter filling the air. Anna smiled, watching her family, and Luke felt a deep peace inside him. But this new beginning had not come without struggle. The court case against Margie was still ongoing. She had pleaded guilty to charges of arson and fraud related to her actions with the HOA. The judge sentenced her to pay fines and community service, but more importantly, Margie lost her position in the neighborhood. Luke hoped that justice would help heal the wounds left behind, not just for his family but for the whole community. It was clear that trust needed to be rebuilt slowly, carefully, with kindness. One evening, the neighborhood held a small celebration. People gathered in the park near Luke's house, bringing food, music, and stories. It was a simple gathering, but for many, it was a sign that life was moving forward. Luke stood before the group, his voice steady but full of feeling. "This has been a hard time for all of us," he said. "We have faced fear, loss, and uncertainty. But today, we celebrate not just what we've lost, but what we have gained: hope, friendship, and a new start." The crowd cheered softly. Anna held Mia's hand, and Luke felt grateful for the strength of his family and neighbors. Later, as the sun set and the stars appeared, Luke and Anna walked home together. The lights inside their new house shone warmly, welcoming them back. That night, Luke sat with Anna and Mia in their new living room. Mia was tired but happy, holding her favorite stuffed animal. Anna looked at Luke and smiled. "We did it," she said softly. "We made it through." Luke nodded. "Yes. And we will keep moving forward." The fire that had burned their old home had tried to take everything from them. But it could not take their spirit, their love, or their hope. They had been tested, but they had come out stronger. Luke thought about Margie not with anger, but with understanding that sometimes, fear and control come from a place of pain. He hoped that someday she would find peace too, but for now, his focus was on healing and growth. In the weeks that followed, Luke found himself more involved in the neighborhood. He helped organize meetings to improve the community, volunteered to support families in need, and worked alongside neighbors to make their streets safe and welcoming. Anna returned to her job with new energy, knowing that their home was a safe place waiting for her at the end of each day. Mia started school again, excited to meet new friends and learn new things. One quiet morning, Luke stood outside, watching the sunrise paint the sky with soft colors. The new house stood tall and proud, a symbol of everything they had overcome. He took a deep breath and smiled. Life was not perfect, and challenges would still come. But Luke knew one thing for sure: no matter what happened, they would face it together. With love, courage, and hope, they could rebuild anything. And so, from the ashes of a painful past, a new story had begun. A story of strength, kindness, and the power of community. Luke's home was more than just a house now. It was a place of new dreams and endless possibilities.